and welcome back to yet another episode of the Gameable Audio. I am your host, Christopher Quenström, and this is episode 53, where we're going to talk about the subject, what about Metroidvanias? And I've selected 5 different tracks that I think is a good representative of the genre itself. But yeah, considering everything, I have no guest for this episode. I'm going to discuss this a little bit on the subject of what I believe is the Metroidvanias. And at the same time, we're going to look into what others think of the subject and the genre of it, Metroidvanias as well. I've gone in and done a little bit of a digging and asking a little bit around, etc. in order to just define a little bit what others think of Metroidvanias. So, first and foremost, I did get a couple of questions from the last guest in episode 52 from Magnus Johansson, and yeah, let's go a little bit through that one. First of all, he asked me for 7 things important to the genre of Metroidvanias. And for me, as a game developer myself and an avid gamer throughout these years and playing a lot of different ones, I was like looking really deep into this, started talking to some friends, etc. And also started looking a little bit on the different kind of games I've played in this genre. And in the end, considering all the different games out there, there were not 7, there were actually 3 main things that I believe is very important to have in a game where we define it as a Metroidvania. So I will talk about these first, and then we will look at the general interpretation of this genre. Number 1 that is important for Metroidvania is to have some sort of upgrade system or skill gain system. This could be you utilizing a currency or something like that in order to upgrade your character in different sense or manners. But at the same time, you can also have some sort of skill gain where you basically wander around in the world and you collect new skills on the way that you will utilize in order to experience and explore this world. And considering exploration, the second point that is important for Metroidvanias is to have multiple connections to the different areas. Therefore, if you're only having like one door, one specific step in order to get to a specific area, etc., could be like a very special area that might have only one, but considering all the main areas that you are supposedly have in the game should have multiple connections to them. And the reason for that is if you only have one all the time, it's basically becoming a more linear kind of experience. Even though some areas might have a door, consider locking, for example, but if you're just having a long corridor going back and forth, people will get really tired of that sense, and it doesn't really implore the importance of adventure, which is kind of defined by the Metroidvania genre. So having multiple kind of connections in these areas so you can come from different angles, etc., depending on the different power-ups, skills, and upgrades you have. And the third one, and in my opinion this is one of the most important ones, is to have multiple weapon choices. These are connected, of course, to upgrades or skill, for example, but if you have some sort of selection in the beginning of the game, right from the get-go, you will have more people drawn into the experience. If you're having like a SMG or having an AR or a sword, etc., you will have so many more people that can get into the experience itself. And as a little bit of an extra pointer, I do believe this is an important thing and is kind of a dead giveaway. I don't know if you guys agree on this one, but having an awesome soundtrack on a Metroidvania is kind of a get-go. Doesn't really matter what, but having an awesome soundtrack is something that is kind of clearly defined by this genre as well, considering all the different kind of soundtracks, etc. that we do have. And this is something I will point out for today's episode as we're listening in on 5 different tracks. So the most 3, just to reiterate on it: upgrade skill gain throughout the world. I want areas to have multiple connections, and in the end, multiple weapon choices, so you're not utilizing just one thing over and over again, because having a one-trick pony is never fun, in my opinion. But of course, these are just my kind of statistics on what defines a little bit more of a Metroidvania, because I was going through this so much in my head feeling like, oh, we need this, you need that. But then it's like, oh, but these genres have these things and these genres have these things. These are 3 points that I think kind of shows off the Metroidvania genre in a better sense, because you kind of have the RPG kind of feeling, but it's not a full RPG. It's not statistics and so on in that sense. So, moving over to Wikipedia then. What does Wikipedia, the people, say about the genre? And I'm going to quote on this because I'm just going to read straight off Wikipedia about for this one. So, Metroidvania is a subgenre of the action-adventure games and or platformers focused on guiding a non-linearity and utility-gated exploration and progression. The term have partially blended the names of video game series such as Metroid and Castlevania, based on the template of Metroid from 1986 and Castlevania 2 from 1987. But this also includes the Super Metroid game from 1994, and one of the biggest things when people started utilizing this term of Metroidvania, Castlevania Symphony of the Night from 1997. So that is kind of the full kind of spectrum of Metroidvania as a subgenre. Well, I agree on this, that it is a subgenre, specifically like I said, and I agree fully on this statement, having an action-adventure game where the platforming part is a guided non-linearity, meaning that, yeah, you doesn't really matter where you can go and so on. You have basically free reins right from the get-go, more or less. And also utilizing the utility-gated exploration and progression also stems a little bit on one of the things that I thought was important, having the upgrades and skill gain. Looking at the definition then, games in the Metroid genre are games that has a large interconnected world map that the players can explore, but there are parts in these worlds that are inaccessible to the players initially. As they acquire new skills, new items, and knowledge of the game, these areas become accessible to them. Even as the term was and has been used for 2D side-scrolling games, the term today has also been applied to top-down or even 3D space. And I would agree here on this kind of more definition of it, how it kind of portrays of what we read in the first section. And yes, this was more prominent in 2D side-scrolling games from the get-go, and we have seen more games applying this to other sections, such as top-down and 3D spaces. There are multiple games in 3D space now that are popping up, and people are getting more excited surrounding these things. I've seen some of these games popping up just by going through the research for this episode. And that is something I really loved, because for me, the 2D space was what kind of defined the Metroidvania genre, and it kind of portrays well, in my opinion. But of course, it's just the identity of the game in themselves is like how and what to implement in them, in my opinion. So, considering these first games, Symphony of the Night was the one that kind of defined the genre of Metroidvania, but of course Metroid from 1986 was the first nonlinear game, and actually the first Metroidvania game for its genre. With that said, I think let's just dive into the first game of this week. It is Super Metroid. It is one of my favorite, Metroid games, and let's enjoy one of the favorite tracks that you will hear a lot of times in this game. Don't shoot me if this might be repetitive or something like that, but I don't usually tend to play the more favorable songs from famous soundtracks, etc. I know a lot of people love and adore the Super Metroid soundtrack, but we're going to listen to Brinstar, and this is the Jungle Floor theme. bum, bum. Well, the bass here is a little bit special in my opinion. I had never really thought about it until I started to really start analyzing this track a little bit more. And as you guys know from the usual part of these episodes, I do have this emotion, and I've been thinking, it's like, what the hell? Why am I not doing this every time to just show a little bit what I feel when I'm listening in on this? It seems to be, I know the composers love hearing these. I don't know about you, the listeners, if you like hearing these, but I like these parts. It is fun to share a little bit of my own experience, how I interpret these songs and so on. So I will just start implementing this even for normal episodes as well. So this was from Super Metroid Brinstar, the jungle floor, the upper part of Brinstar area. And my emotion for this is that the area in this game, it is quite rocky, but it still kind of flourishes a little bit with these alien jungle vibe plants that hangs around in this area. It is a bit minimalistic, but it still looks great. My emotion for this track. There is this intention of a xylophone that hits, that moves from left to right and vice versa. This really gives off this traditional jungle vibe for some reason. It feels like it's a little bit everywhere, but it's still kind of cozy to some extent. But in the midway of this track, we get these like drive-by ghost screams that you can hear a little bit in the background here as I'm talking about it. Ha, ha. Yeah, it gives a little bit a sense of mystery and eagerness of exploration for me. And then you do have this bass sound that does really have this really grudgingly deep bass note that kind of vibrates. And you can hear this in the background as well. Dun, dun. And exactly where I kind of toned out the track as well. Considering this bass note, it kind of gives the sense of industrial style to me. Listening today, you have this really kind of structured, ongoing tune that goes on, feels a little bit mechanic. You kind of have that sense with this track as well. Bum, 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 bum. Just going on throughout this track. So, overall, this track is very playful with the sounds moving around. There's a lot of things happening, even though it kind of feels minimalistic when you're isolating each and every sound of this. And I do remember when I was this young little Chris, I was a little bit scared of what will kind of pop up moving forward. But considering this song, it is a great track. And at the same time, it is very hard for me to hear this track without seeing Smooth My Groove in front of me. And for people that don't know, this is a guy that became very famous making VGM a cappella sounds. So I really like this track, and it is still, to this day, one of my favorite tracks from the Metroid series. Of course, there's a lot of different good ones and from the different games, etc., but this is one that I hold dear to my heart. So, looking at the deep dive here a little bit more on the track and everything. So the track here was specifically composed and, well, most likely by the Japanese Kenji Yamamoto. According to my my search here, he did do the Brinstar area. And together on this OST, we also have the Japanese Minako Hamano. And the game were developed by the Japanese studio Nintendo R&D, so Research and Develop, #1, and also the second party of Intelligent System CO, which is also a Japanese studio. The game here was initially released on the Super Nintendo back in 1994, but have since then been ported for games like not games, but for consoles like Wii in 2007, Wii U in 2013, new Nintendo 3DS, and lastly, the Switch, and both of these were in 2019. And I want to note that these are ports, and they were released as a digital download through the eShop, so they were not like remasters or anything like that. And if we're diving in a little bit more on the composers here, so Kenji has been in the games industry for a long time, starting out back in 1987 with Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! Kenji has been working for Nintendo-related companies during his whole career, and he's about like 50-50, considering like the credits and everything I found. He's about 50-50 in either being a composer or a sound director. He has worked on series such as Metroid, and that includes the Fusion and Prime series, back in 2002, Zero Mission in 2003, Echoes in 2004, Prime Pinball in 2005, and Corruption in 2007. So that includes the full Prime series. And then other series that he has been working on has been Donkey Kong Country, starting with the Donkey Kong Country Returns game in 2010, Returns 3D in 2013, and Tropical Freeze in 2014. But he has also worked on some Rhythm Heaven games, which are really fun games, to be honest. I don't own a lot of them. I do own one of the games that he has made music for. But first on, before we're rushing everything, Rhythm Heaven Fever for the Wii in 2011 was one of those. And then the Mega Mix for the 3DS in 2015. And this is the one that I own, and it's really fun. It is really good, in my opinion. And the last game that he did work on is the Metroid Dread game, both as a composer but also as a music director. And the game here was released in 2021. But there is also the Metroid Prime Remastered, which did get a release on the Switch in 2023, so it is an earlier or later release. But I do guess since he was the music producer role here, it was more for the arrangement as he composed the original soundtrack for these games. And on his other side, we have Minako. Minako did also a lot of work on different kind of games as well, but many of these were together with Kenji. And considering all the different games that she worked on, her first work that she did was actually for The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening for the Game Boy back in 1993. And some other, just to have some other names, games named instead of like naming a lot of the same ones as Kenji. Minako worked on the Game Boy Camera, released in 1998, the Pokemon Puzzle Challenge for the Game Boy Color in 2000. We have Tetris DS in 2006 and Wario Land Shake It for the Wii in 2008. And then the Mario Tennis Ultra Smash in 2015, which was released for the Wii U. And the last title that she did work on were on Metroid Dread. And considering Minako has worked on many roles, but mainly as a composer or a sound coordinator, which is most likely why she has been such a great partner together with Kenji here. And it was just super fun to get to know these people a little bit more through the music that I've been working on. I've been playing a lot of these games that they have worked on, and all of these games that I've played at least have really great soundtracks. I've either listened to the soundtracks or I've played the games and really enjoy these tracks. Even though some of these games are really hard, but it is what it is. I mean, games were like they were back in the day. Considering Super Metroid is one of those games that I played when I was younger but never really finished. I actually finished it for the first time not too long ago. We're talking about within like a period of 2 to 3 years is when I completed this for the first time. I have played it from time to time, kind of stopped playing it and then took it up again, stopped playing it, and then it kind of went into disarray and I need to start over again, etc. But Super Metroid is really fun. It kind of portrays, considering that we're looking at Metroidvanias here, Super Metroid is one of those games that you do have different kind of weapons in. You kind of have the buster shooting that you can upgrade and so on and get different kind of mechanics with them. But you also have the missiles, the super missile. You can also become a little ball and start placing bombs, etc. and bounce around on those. But you also have multiple kind of pickups that you will get throughout the game as well, which is skills and things you can utilize. For example, you have the hook shot and so on. And not everything is parted through combat or etc. You can actually utilize a lot of different things just to get around in the world. And this is also one of the things that I had as an important part moving on and looking at the genre of Metroidvania. So when it comes to Super Metroid, it kind of ticks all the boxes that I feel is a Metroidvania kind of game. You're going back and forth through different areas multiple times, but you're kind of coming in and going out of it in different sections every time as you're getting these new skills or you're unlocking new paths, etc. So it feels most of the times pretty fresh, and when you have gotten something new, you usually have some sort of power-up that kind of increase or decreases the time you spend in different areas when you travel to them again, which is also something that is really good. But at the same time, in Super Metroid, since you don't really have a good sense of where to go all the time, you might end up going through different kind of sections in this game multiple times, and that could theoretically be kind of frustrating to some part and some extent. But overall, I would say Super Metroid was a really good game in this genre, considering what it kind of had to give to people playing the game. And with that said, let's dive into the next track of the week. And this is one of my favorites, specifically on this list, because I feel like I'm one of the few people that really love and adore this game. I've been talking to a lot of people, and people do not hold it in the same sense as I do for this one. The game that I'm talking about is Castlevania Circle of the Moon, and we're listening to the classic vampire killer from the area, the Observatory Tower. Returning back from Castlevania Circle of the Moon, Vampire Killer from the Observatory Tower. And my emotion for this one, a returning legend. But that does, it does have some changes in its soundscape from what I remember. But still, we have a piano vibe doing the main part of this track, but there's also other instruments. And this track has always given a sense of epicness to it. What I mean about that is that the melody here is really groovy. Even in the 8-bit version, this track holds up well, but there are all these kind of different arrangements who have kept it as I would say, an ever-changing masterpiece. And I'm always vibing hard when I'm killing monsters and demons in these Castlevania games, and this track, puts on. It is so freaking good. But looking at the track and everything itself here, originally this classic tune of Vampire Killer was composed by the amazing Japanese Satoe Terashima. And considering the development of this track overall and the rearrangements, there have been different people around this. And for the soundtrack of Circle of the Moon, we have this specific case. So for the soundtrack of Circle of the Moon, we have two Japanese people, Sotaro Tojima and Hiroshi Mitsuoka. And considering here that I didn't find too much about the last said composer here, but they're stated as arranger and composer in that sense. So some of these are original tracks within this soundtrack, but some are arrangements, basically, from other games. And this is something that also kind of conveys through Castlevania over time. There's a lot of tracks that we remember from old and still listening to till this day in different rearranged versions, and it's so much fun, to be honest. The game here, it was developed by the Japanese studio Konami and released on the Game Boy Advance back in 2001. The game did only get one additional digital release, and this happened on the Wii U back in 2014. And considering the composers here, Sotaro started working within music and specifically stated sound back in 1998, making sound for the game Blaze and Blade Busters for the PlayStation 1. After that, he started working on a long dedicated time at Konami, starting out with the game specifically for Gambare Goemon series. And this was back in 1999. Through his time at Konami, he did work on multiple different kind of IPs, and this includes Metal Gear Solid, Castlevania, and Pop and Music. And going through a lot of the different kind of tracks and so on that we can see, not tracks, but the games that we can see here, we have Pop and Music in 2000, we have Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty in 2001, the Metal Gear Solid 2 Substance in 2002, Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, and Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater in 2004, Castlevania Curse of Darkness in 2005, Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops in 2006. I don't know if that's the first handheld game for the Metal Gear Solid series, but I'm guessing there might have been a Game Boy somewhere there. But it's fun to see a Portable Ops in the name of a Metal Gear game. And this was the first one I could solidly find that had portable in that sense. There's another one which is mobile, but that one released later. And, well, considering that, back to the dates and everything. So Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots that released in 2009. And in 2012, he started working on another big series, and stated the one is Halo 4. And this kind of followed up with Halo 5 in 2015, and lastly worked as the audio director for Halo Infinite, and specifically the campaign for that game. And this happened in 2021. There are still some other games that kind of sticks out, such as Son of the Enders, the second run in 2003. We have Yu-Gi-Oh! The Secret Cards in 2002. But the rest of it is kind of a little bit of different versions and different ports for the Metal Gear Solid releases, basically. And looking at the other composer, Hiroshi here, on the other hand, here, in comparison to Sotaro, he's kind of a one-trick pony, and the reason for that is that I only did find the work he did for Castlevania Circle of the Moon on this person, so there's not much more for me to add on him. So that's a little bit sad, to be honest, but it's still fun. Anyway, when it comes to the game Castlevania Circle of the Moon, and the reason why I like it so much, first and foremost, the games that I've played before Castlevania Circle of the Moon were basically the NES and the Super Nintendo games. So you have the first, second, and Super Castlevania, the fourth game that I've played actively, to my knowledge. I've heard a little bit about, when I started getting into Circle of the Moon, I heard a little bit about Symphony of the Night, but I haven't really paid too much attention on it in this case. But Circle of the Moon, when I got into that one, it was one of the Castlevania games that I was like really happy to get into. I played it on an emulator first and foremost when I tried it the first time. And I had so much fun. And the reason for this is this unique card system that they utilized within. I don't think they used that system in any other game. And it's the reason why I like it so much, but it is also the exact same reason why other people dislike this game. Because within Castlevania Circle of the Moon, this card system that they implemented, you combine two different kinds of cards, one with elements and one with kind of a tarot kind of vibe to it. And these cards are randomly dropped by different enemies within this game, and they portray the different elements, basically, for the whip that you're having. So you can theoretically have not just a whip, you can have swords and so on as well. So depending on which combinations you're doing, you're having a fluent in your arsenal of weapons and power-ups, etc. So instead of just walking around and getting upgrades all the time, you can actually get drops from the enemy. So it kind of added that depth to it, and I really thought it was fun, because all of a sudden, even within boss battles and so on, you could be very dynamic and fluent in how you can work around the different bosses and movements and things happening. And of course, some of these combinations were used in order to reach certain areas and so on, and find a lot of different things. So this card system was actually used for exploration within this world in order to get access to different pathings and so on. But at the same time, it wasn't really super clear on who or which enemy to kind of farm in order to get this. These were information that you kind of conveyed over time to understand, etc. So it was kind of hard getting a good understanding, but it was very in a very playful way. And considering the statement of the world, I don't remember too many like extra paths and so on, not to a bigger extent, but there are still some multiple ways in order to get around, shortcuts, etc. But you do need to have these cards for many of these places, so that kind of destroys the active pathing way moving around in the castle of this game. And that kind of is the part that gives it the least kind of points, in my opinion. You still have a fun way with the cards, making and ticking the box of how weapons work, and you still have the some power-ups, etc. that you will get throughout the game, which will still, you can still play through this game without collecting all these cards and so on. The game is still fully playable no matter what. But I really like that part, even if you don't need to collect everything, because just by collecting and getting things, you will just get more information on hand. It's not, everything is kind of optional, and that's fun. That's really fun considering that. And if you want to have a full collection and so on, of course it's going to be very grindy and so on, but considering that you will have kind of a flow in, so even if you're just playing through a game, you can still get different kind of drops, different kind of card setups and so on. Therefore, each and every playthrough can be different. And this is why I think Circle of the Moon shines so much. So for me, Circle of the Moon is still one of the better Castlevania games to this day for me. I've played a lot of the different ones, not all of them, but I have played a lot of different Castlevania games. They are hard, they are fun, and there's a lot of trial and error on this. And considering the Castlevanias on the Metroidvania aspects, Circle of the Moon is, of course, worse than Symphony of the Night, for example, but Circle of the Moon is an underdog to me. It is fun. It is specifically need to think about that this is a Game Boy Advance game as well. Definitely 2 thumbs up for me, if you're asking me, but I don't just take my words for it. There's a lot of opinions on Circle of the Moon, and I know a lot of people hold the Symphony of the Night way higher than the Circle of the Moon, so. But anyway, next game that we're going to talk about on the subject of Metroidvanias is one I know a lot of people hold high, and specifically me. I think this is the one and true best Metroidvania in the sense of Metroidvanias, and the game that I'm talking about is Hollow Knight. And the track that I've picked for this one is one that really have grown on me lately. It is City of Tears. Fading out the City of Tears from the game Hollow Knight. My emotion for this one, it is a very beautiful track here. Even though through the title it sparks a sadness over it. And the area this track is played in is an area where it is raining. The track itself sparks more of hope in my opinion, and Overall, the full original soundtrack feels very dark and has this overhanging melancholy to it. But the City of Tears, it is very beautiful, like I said. And it is a ray of hope, music-wise. I really like the string instruments in the later part of this track, and I believe it is a harp that we can hear that Chris implemented into this track. I'm not fully sure, but it's some sort of string instrument. I don't know, I would say a harp. But when they pluck these single strings that kind of pops in very often, you can hear it in the background. But it actually gave a sense of rain. Raindrops on the water, I would say. It has this kind of really short note to it. And it's beautiful. It really clings in that sense from, like, when you're trying to add music to a motion picture in any sense. But I do wonder if that was the intention of it, if that's the intended part of the City of Tears. I have no clue, but was my emotion of listening through it and just enjoying it. And like I said, this is one of those tracks that really grew on me over time. I didn't like the City of Tears too much. There's a lot of other tracks that I really like from Hollow Knight, but this one, thanks to a remix that I've listened to through game shops, the City of Tears has really grew on me, even the original one, but I really like the remixed one. So, looking at this amazing composition, it was done by the Australian Christopher Larkin, a man that a lot of people might have started listening or following after his work on this specific game. And the game here was developed by the Australian studio Team Cherry. And the game, it was released back in 2017, initially on PC, Linux, and Macintosh. And the game has since then been ported to multiple consoles as well. Nintendo Switch, PS4, and Xbox One in 2018, Windows Apps in 2019, and Xbox Cloud Gaming Service in 2020. And we did visit Christopher a while back, as we have talked about Hollow Knight before. I didn't go too deep into any details or anything. But since he haven't been working on too many games as of yet, I think we can just go through them all again. Christopher started out with the game named Expand back in 2014, and he followed up with a handheld Pac-Man 245 that released on iPad back in 2015. But it did also get a PC release later in 2016, But then he did like the ending speed recording for a game called Hacknex, and that game was released in 2015 as well. And in 2016 he worked on the game Outfolded, and then this big behemoth that became super popular, Hollow Knight. And he has since then started working on games like Time Spinner in 2018, Tohu in 2021, and lastly on Submerged Hidden Depth in 2022. And the question is now, what is next? We might ask ourselves. Well, over on his homepage, we can already see his next work, and as we can clearly see, it is the second game of Hollow Knight series, Silksong, a game that we hopefully will be getting a release on in 2025. I'm just super excited and stoked for Silksong because I really enjoyed the first game. And here's the reason why. So, in the world of Hollow Knight, you are basically set with a very limited set of skills, and in this case weapons, but also skills, to be honest, in all honesty. You will get some utility things that you can utilize, like a dash that can go through certain things and so on, but also there will be more things over the course of time in this game. But the setup for Hollow Knight, you will basically have a jump, move left and right, the dash will pop in quite early, and you will also have this little nail, your sword, in this game. And you will have other kind of medallion-like things that you will pick up, and you can utilize these in order to get more perks, like you can reach further when you're hitting with the nail, etc. And that will kind of occupy your whole shenanigans, and you will be able to address more of these power-ups and so on over the course of time in this game. And the thing that is most important in this game, even if it doesn't really tick my box of having great amounts of weaponry things, it's still a very fun game. And the reason for this is the fact that the world is so well built. And what I mean about that, when I started playing this back in, I don't remember exactly, I think it's 2019, 2020 or something like that, 2020. And when I started playing this, I actually started playing this on par with my colleague. My colleague were playing it on a handheld on Switch, and I was playing it on my PS4 at home. And every day when we got to work, we actually talked about what we did, our adventures in the world of Hollow Knight. And every day, even if we played every day and we talked every day about this, both him and I had different stories. We met different bosses, we made it to different areas, etc. When we had these conversations, it felt so bizarre because I myself were so used to having more of a linear kind of understanding of video games, how you kind of transcend over story-wise from you moving from A to B, B to C, etc. But all of a sudden with Hollow Knight, everything felt so alive. Even if you, for me, I was really good at wall jumping, for example, jumping on the walls and so on. And I was just really eager to get certain spots. And some of these were almost, it felt like pixel perfection in order to get things. But you could get around a lot of places in this game without power-ups that made it so much easier, even though they did. But it was so much fun, like skipping certain bosses and so on. In this sense, I would say Hollow Knight is like the 2D version of a Dark Souls game. And what I mean about that is Dark Souls is also one of those really open world games where you can skip bosses, go past bosses, and move around and meet bosses in different kind of numeric order and so on. And it's so much fun. And Hollow Knight was just like this when we were playing. And overall, we had an amazing time. And it is just crazy. So this is why Hollow Knight made such a great impact on me, and specifically for Metroidvanias. I played a couple of Metroidvanias up to this date when I played Hollow Knight, but Hollow Knight was by far the best one I've played. And it doesn't really have a great story in that sense, because all text and everything, there's literally no text, it's just pictures and moving around and having a good time in this really dark world. And it's scary, it is hard, but in the end, the controls in this game is just pure fun. And I think that's why it earns such a great praise, to be honest. But on the topic of having goodness to it and being impressive in a lot of sense, I think is a great segue to the next game that we're going to talk about. And it is one of those games that I've recently played, and I was just blown away by it. And the game is called F.I.S.T, F-I-S-T, but it also has the under name of it, which is what F.I.S.T stands for, the Forged in Shadow Torch. And we're going to listen to the short track called Kung Fu Dummy. Kung Fu Dummy from F.I.S.T, Forged in Shadow Torch. And my emotion for this one, it really gives off this retro vibe. It is playful. I do get this, and I do the rabbit ears, the quotation mark, training-styled dojo soundscape. There is some glitchy sound effect that kind of reminds me of other games, like the pipe sound from Mario games, and to some extent the music style from, I don't know why, but I get the feeling of International Karate Plus from the older Commodore. I think it was Atari as well, but yeah, the older IK Plus. But even if the full OST here is amazing, this is the track that really got stuck on my brain from that game. And even if if you do hear it, I would say pretty little throughout this game, but it pops up so often, and it is very catchy and playful. Like, it's a really short one, just like this song. The motion is really short, but there was a lot of other tracks I would have liked to select it as well, but I couldn't go away from this one because I had such a blast just listening to this every time. I never got tired of this track. Never. Anyway, so there's not a lot of information about the composer here, Caisheng, and from what I can piece together, it seems like he is a Chinese person who lives in Beijing. And the game here, it was developed by the Chinese studio Shanghai TI Games Network Technology Limited. And the game, it was released on PS4, PS5, and PC initially in 2021. And the game did get a Switch release in 2022, Windows apps, Xbox One, Xbox Series, and cloud gaming back in 2023. And looking at the composer here, Caisheng is pretty new into the video game composer area, as he started out making the game Unruly Heroes back in 2019, and then the F.I.S.T in 2021, and lastly Have a Nice Death in 2022. And what's kind of interesting here is that F.I.S.T is actually the game I've heard last of. The reason for this is I've actually had friends play Unruly Heroes. I've seen this game go live myself, and it looked like a fun game. And considering Have a Nice Death, I've seen this game in multiple stores, and multiple times as well. So that game has really been promoted to me for some reason. I've not played that one. I did play a little bit of Unruly Heroes. It felt like a little bit like a Trine game almost, but less puzzles, more battle. But just like a comment that fell into my lap, F.I.S.T kind of popped in from Epic Game Stores as a free game to play or just download from their store, and I was just amazed about how it looked and how it played. It was a blast. So for me, F.I.S.T was one of those games that really took me by surprise, and I played it this year, so for me, it's kind of a new game, but it still looks really good. It is really solid as a game, and it's fun to play. In this world, yes, a lot of things are connected to each other, but you can also take fast travel points, etc., in order to get around in multiple sections, but sometimes some of these aren't really good connected, but moving around in this world is quite fast, even if it looks big on the map. But the game itself, it actually takes a lot of time completing the game, and I never really felt like that in the beginning. It felt like, oh, I'm gonna complete this in like 8 hours or something like that, but no. Even if I had fun and it didn't feel like I put all this time into this experience, I gladly did it, to be honest. I had so much fun. It was really nice working with the system of combat in this one. For example, usually when you play a Metroid game or something like that, you can mix up how you shoot and so on, but you still shoot your weapon itself. But in F.I.S.T, you will have a hammer, or a fist is the first one. You will get a drill, and you will then get a whip later. And all these have different kind of functionalities in how you fight and how you kind of move around and get power-ups and upgrades for them. And what I like about this is when you get to this Kung Fu Dummy part where you get this track, this is the area where you upgrade your weapon area, get new skills and so on. So the fighting itself in F.I.S.T is kind of like a fighting game, like you're playing Street Fighter or something like that. You have some combinations that you click out, and then you will be doing really cool moves that really puts on a show, I would say. So I was utterly surprised when this game popped into my lap, and I started playing this one. I did own it for a little bit. It was like mid 2024 that we got it for free. And just to have this said as well, as of this episode is released, F.I.S.T. Forged in Shadow Torch is free to download as a soundtrack over on Steam. So if you like this song and just would like to listen in on the whole other tracks that are available for this one, which I highly recommend, you can just get it for free over on Steam. So that's a good thing if you like video game music and like this song and just want to listen to more. And on the topic of amazing more tracks, I mean, we've been listening to a lot of amazing tracks already, but I've saved the last and best one. I saved the last one and best one. No, I saved the best one for last. That's what I'm supposed to say. And this is my favorite Metroidvania game from last year, 2024. And I'm not gonna say anything else. I'm just gonna let the track speak for itself. This is Ender Lilies, Quietus of the Nights, and the track is named Harmonious. Fading Out Harmonious from Ender Lilies, Quietus of the Night. And this track specifically was one of my favorite VGM tracks of 2024. It gives me so many emotions at once today. But my journey with this track throughout the game, it made me go through emotions like hope, sorrow, and anger. Even as the track itself is quite calm, the meaning of this track kind of changed with the story and the lore of the world. First, it was just a beautiful track of humming. But as I learned more about this world and what happened, I started to feel other emotions. The sorrow of loss. It grew to anger over the time. And in the end, it kind of became hope. As the vocals of this track plays the biggest part in this track without spoiling anything. So for me, I really like this track. I love still listening to this. This track is on my Spotify list as well. Specifically this song. I don't like to put in full soundtracks in a list. I usually handpick some tracks and enjoy them from there. And yeah, this one is so beautiful. But yeah, like I said, there's a lot of emotion going on for me with this track today, but I still love and adore this one. Definitely. So the name of the people or group specifically is Mili, and might not say much to people today, and the name itself feels very generic, but after some research, I did find out that Mili is actually the name of an international indie band based in Japan, and the soundtrack here was composed by the band members Yamamoto Kasai, who stood for the composition and arrangement, and Kasiwei, who stood for lyrics and composition. The game here was developed by the Japanese studios AdGlobe Inc. and Livewire Inc. The game itself was initially released on all major platforms back in 2021. It was PC, Switch, Xbox One and Xbox Series, and PS4. And just to name a little bit more about this group now as well. So Mili, they don't have too many tracks or titles that are standing out to me specifically, but these are a lot of different tracks that they grew over time and so on. Checking out the individuals here on as a composer, there were not too many titles at all. So checking out the indie band's homepage, we can clearly see a history of different games they've worked on over the course of time. And they actually started all back when the band was formed back in August 2012. In November, they worked on their first game, and this was an OST for the game Quietus. And in the year following up, 2013, they did the music for games such as Backstage Pass in November, Demo in September, and Munica Cry for Pluto in March. You're noticing I'm going backwards on the months here, but I kind of just went bottom and followed up, and I didn't want to mess too much in my brain. So please do with me on the monthly parts, because I will follow the same structure following up. And from 2013, we have a little bit of a gap from the game perspective, but don't worry. In 2018, we had a full OST for the game Mirror's Crossing in January. In 2019, we have an OST for World Flipper in November, Promise of Wizard, which is a translated title from Japanese that released in October. And in 2020, they had 7 themes for the game Library of Ruina. And in 2021, they did 1 theme song for the game Limbus Company in November and the full OST for Ender Lilies. In 2022, they did the theme song for multiple games, Promise of Wizard again in March, then Thy Creature, and lastly, Welcome to Dreamland, another Japanese translated game, both in February. And in 2023, multiple tracks and soundtrack for the game Limbus Company returned again in December, and in June and in February, they did more work on Limbus Company as well. Then they did more tracks for the game Demo 2 that released in May, and lastly in 2024 we had 5 more tracks for Promise of Wizard in November, we have more tracks for Limbus Company in October and May, and last but not least a theme song for Arknight in April. And well, there's a lot of different games. They had some songs here, some songs there, a little bit of an OST there, a little bit of an OST there. But on top of all this work, they've still worked on their own original work. They've worked on animes, making different kind of songs for some animes that we know of here in the West, but some other that might be more prominent in Japan. But they also, on top of this, also did concerts and festivals. So there's a lot of things going on with this band as well, and initially looking in on it didn't look like they did much at all, but everything's also in the context, and not every time the context is fully visible, so you always need to go in and deep dive a little bit more. It is so much fun just to get to the bottom of some certain things, and just getting to know the band people a little bit more. And for me, there's a lot of games here that I did not know of. So I'm definitely going to check in some of these games, at least some of the newer games, just to see what they are, what type of games they are, etc. Because they did not specify that on their homepage. It was just names and which company made them. So it's super fun, to be honest. And it is so much fun when you're starting in one game and ending up going through like 12 others, and it's just crazy. And this is why I think it's important for us to just go through this, and why I'm having such a great time doing it. So Ender Lilies Quietus of the Nights was a game that I played last year. This was a game that released on PSN Plus, and I've had this since like I think it was around May last year, and I played at my old childhood friend's place, and he let me play this, and I had a good time, and I was like, yeah, I would like to play this. This is fun. But I had so many other games that I wanted to play and already had in my list, so I didn't really felt like I wanted to buy another one just because. So I was just focused on completing other games that I already owned, and all of a sudden I just noticed like, oh, Ender Lilies is free on PSN Plus. So just get the membership and I can just download it and play it instead of purchasing it and playing it in that same sense. So I actually got it through PSN Plus, and I had a great time with this. It is so beautiful. It is so much going on in this. But considering the different statements that I've done before, in Ender Lilies, you have a lot of different connections, but they're structured in another sense and form. So it's a little bit more problematic to move around. You are more prominent to move around utilizing the fast travel points rather than walking around in this game all the time. But there might be certain areas, etc., that you might go to through these connections, etc., instead of going round. But there's a lot of different ways and so on, shortcuts to be open up again, etc. So this is something we see similar in a whole lot of different games in this genre. But it still kind of conveys one of the structures and things that I think is important for the Metroidvania, and it is that the world needs to be connected in some sense in multiple areas, because if it just spreads out like a starfish, it's like you have a hub, and then from the hub you get to all the different areas and so on, and you need to go through the hub all the time. The hub area will be really freaking boring over time, and why I think it's important for me to state the fact that you need multiple kind of entrances and so on is due to the fact of games such as Tomb Raider when they remade that series, rebooted it more or less. Because in those games you have like semi-linear stories and so on, but you open up things over time and it kind of becomes open and so on. But you usually tend to return to areas which you recently been to. You never really go through 2 or 3 other areas and then return back to another one, which is important. So for me, like Tomb Raider the reboot is not a Metroidvania, even if the world is kinda open. So it's so much easier to point out in games such as the ones we've gone through today in having these open worlds to that extent. So for me, when you have these kind of structures in this, yes, Metroidvania is a subgenre, like we stated in the beginning of this episode. It is a subgenre of the action-adventure genres. And what ended up in this is, for me, having a system where you use skill or getting upgrades of any kind over the course of time, which will help you open up new areas throughout this game. And you will have different kind of weapons in order to just make it playful and have a good time, because utilizing just one isn't really enough. But there are some exceptions for that. Hollow Knight was a great exception for that. And in Ender Lilies, you're not having a weapon yourself. You're having spirits that accompany you on your journey in this world. And the world is hard. It is full of sorrow. And you are this little girl basically walking around with ghostly protectors where you need to just figure out what the hell is going on. And she's super cute, and the game is dark, but it is really good. But at the same time, there are certain areas in this game that is really frustrating as well. For example, the boss battles are really not balanced in a sense, shape, or form. Or you just need to be really good at certain timings. So if you're eager to get into Ender Lilies, I highly recommend getting timers down, because if you do, and if you have a good sense of timing, then Ender Lilies is going to be easier to play at least. But it will come with some frustration, but it's still a really, really good game. But on the top of everything, these were 5 different tracks, 5 different games, both in shape, form, but still having the same mother to it, being a Metroidvania. The biggest question then would be, my top 5 Metroidvanias, if I'm gonna order them in some sense where I believe like, oh, the top one is something you need to... These are top 5 games that I believe people definitely need to play in the genre of Metroidvanias. First one, definitely Hollow Knight. It is the best one. It has a lot of content to it, together with all the different DLCs, etc., which is with the deluxe versions available to everything. So definitely check that out. A lot of great content as well, multiple endings, etc. Next one is the sequel, the not sequel to Hollow Knight, but the sequel to Ori, being Ori and the Will of the Wisps. Really fun, really thorough game. Has a lot of life to it, vibrantness, and I just love and adore the movement and style of Ori, especially since I loved the first one. And no, Ori, the first game, is not following up. It's another game that I haven't really talked about in a long time, and I did not talk about this in this special about Metroidvanias. It is just an Elysian Tale. One game that really took me by surprise. There's a lot of things going on in that game. I don't want to talk about it too much. I just highly recommend the game. It has a little bit of a special style of how it looks, the graphical style, but please be with me and just go through with the art style of it. It is an amazing gameplay game, and the story is just amazing. And it is fun and humorous as well with the sidekick that you have in this game. Following up on 4th place, we have Ender Lilies, Quietus of the Night. As I said, it does have a little bit of frustration moments, but overall it's a fun, exciting game. And following up on the last spot of this day and my top 5 for Metroidvanias is Ori and the Blind Forest, the first game in the Ori series. And that one is just a beautiful story. It, yet again, is really playful and fun. The biggest issue about that one is when you're walking around in this big world, you have these temples that you need to get to, and by releasing the corruption in these temples, you're basically opening up a timed moment, which is usually pretty frustrating, but you kind of spawn in again, goes pretty fast, but those hectic moments are really frustrating and can be problematic. So that's why I believe that one falls a little bit lower, but still a freaking great game. And one last question that I did get from Magnus Johansson is the question, is Zelda 2 a Metroidvania? And considering all the things that we talked about, Zelda 2 is a game where you have corridors going back and forth, you're moving around in an overworld, so you're having this 2D space of having a 2D platformer, but you're also having a top-down type of game that leads you back to the normal world as well. But considering the states and facts that I had, initially I did say no to this, but you're still walking around in an open world. There are multiple ways to my understanding of this. I haven't played the full game of Zelda 2, if I'm gonna be honest, so somebody might correct me on that one, but from the parts that I do remember, there are some areas that has multiple ways to get to certain things. If not in the 2D platforming part, it has on the top down, as I remember. I might be remembering wrong on that one, but I know a lot of people would like to add Zelda 2 to the Metroidvania. Initially, I would have said no myself, but due to the fact of having corridors and so on, but the more I think about it and the more about the criteria and everything that I've stated throughout this episode, I would say yes. So during this episode, I've changed my answer from no to yes as well. So it is crazy how things can change. And I've been thinking about this question a lot before I recorded this episode. But anyway, do you agree? Do you guys agree? How did you like the music? I would love to hear from you guys. What do you think about Metroidvanias? Is this something you like to play right now? Have you played it before, or do you not like it at all for some reason? Please comment on this episode and let me know what you like. And if you don't want to comment on any episode, feel free to join in on the Discord and talk to everybody there. There's a lot of listeners and also composers over on the Discord server. So, if you like this episode and would like to listen in on other episodes on different subjects, but best of all, interviews with amazing composers, you find those episodes by searching for Gameable Audio over on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, and Pocket Casts. And don't forget to also subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're right now having 17 people, 17 subscribers. So if you're a listener and you want to support the podcast a little bit, feel free to just go in and subscribe and follow the YouTube channel as well. Yay! And feel free to follow and comment on one of our social medias, either on Facebook or on Instagram. Just search for Gameable Audio, and having just a follow or a comment helps other people to find the podcast, etc. And if you would like to support this podcast, helping me financially with everything, and it would help me to actually move around a little bit also if I would be able to get that sort of money. But when I don't need more money, or I don't need more money for traveling or something like that in order to get to conferences or talk to other composers and so on, then it's gonna work as a fund. We will make money and give it to new composers that need them, basically. So when I don't need more money, I will definitely just give it to somebody that does need it and support this community of VGM musicians. And yeah, thank you so much for everybody who's listening in and everybody who's supporting over on Patreon. Then just search for Gameable Audio and you'll find the Patreon there. And the current awesome backers that we do have today is Daniel Onemark, Mike Björkholm, Lars Schenström, Titti Schenström, Kevin Wikström, Sandris Wikström, Mats El Kebab och Tapper Holmqvist, and Alexander Halldén. Thank you so much for being a part and supporting my work here with the podcast. And of course, everybody else who's listening in on this, there's always some sort of giveaway and so on that's happening throughout and connected to episodes. And if you also want something extra on top of that, there's a exclusive podcast called Gameable Spinoff over on that Patreon as well, where I talk a little bit more about video games and playing games with friends. So feel free to just get that as a little bit of an extra bonus. And links where you can either buy and support the composers behind the music that we'll listen to today, you'll find those in the episode description. And the next episode theme that we're going to have is a Cthulhu Reach Devil Reef special, together with the composer and sound designer Per Fransson. He is going to talk a little bit more about it, and I already talked to him a little bit, not when I recorded this, we haven't recorded episodes, but we will soon do it as well. So if people are thorough and really want to get a question in, always remember the Discord, as always. And if you're on Discord, you can always prepare questions for the upcoming episodes as well. But I did talk to Per Fransson over on Nordic Game Conference in 2024, and that's how I got to meet him and talk more about the game. I've been playing the game a little bit, and I'm just super excited to talk to Per, to get to know a little bit more of what's happening throughout in the background, etc. And yeah, I'm just totally stoked and excited for the next episode. And the podcast theme music was, as always, composed by the amazing Thor Myrdal. And with that said, I want to thank everybody for listening in. This was episode 53 on the topic of what about Metroidvania. I'm your host, Kristoffer Schenström. And with that said, thank you all for listening in on Gameable Audio. And see you all guys next time.